Hello and welcome to another episode of Danica Raven's Bite Size Horror. This week's episode is about the strained relationship between father and son, which only worsens when the father passes away. In this Edgar Allan Poe themed story, The Buried Heirloom by Geoffrey Salkeld. If you're sitting comfortably, we shall begin. I was furious. That necklace was mine. It should have been left to me as my father's only son, but now it hung around the neck of his corpse down in the crypt. I stood now among the pews. A shaft of light shone down the steps and onto the stone casket. The answer was simple. I would get back what was rightfully mine. I would prise open the lid and retrieve the heirloom from around its clammy neck. I turned, startled, as the vicar entered the church. No other man was as one with the spirits as he. I looked away from my father's tomb quickly, for fear that he would guess that my scheming line of thought followed that line of sunlight down into the crypt. I swiftly took my leave, bidding the vicar good day, with the air of one saddened by their father's death. Oh, I was so clever, oh, so clever. Now to wait. I must give time for my father's spirit to leave that burly frame of his. The vicar would not have been worried by such ideas, so in tune with the souls of the dead as he. But I knew that it would take some time for my father's ghost to depart its home of 70 years and proceed to the afterlife. I had no rush ahead, and on opening the tomb, meet man's greatest fear. I shuddered. Fear that the old man would sit up in his decaying structure and scorn me as he had when I was a child. You're good for nothing, son. Always have been, always will be. Useless. His thick hand would grasp my ear and lift me up. Now the fear of being pulled so close to that decaying face would stop my heart still faster than any physical torture. For my heart was not strong. I'd always been a sickly child, and never met, let alone exceeded, his expectations. There had been a time when I frustratedly tried to convince the devilish vicar of the true nature of life and death. Yet the wicked man remained unmoved. Although I told him repeatedly, as our spirits flee from one life to the next, it can become attached to the physical framework on which it builds a life. If it lives a long time in a particular carcass, it can become so attached to it that even after death, the spirit will linger in the remains until it becomes too decomposed for it to bear. If the spirit has had a particularly horrific experience in life, then sometimes it will abide in the corpse until there is nothing left. In the rare case of the latter occurring, then the spirit in question will occasionally attempt to manipulate the body, much to the terror of those who encounter it. This will not happen to me. I will be sure of that. I give it 3 months for the spirit of my father to leave its home of 70 years. I borrowed a crossbar from a neighbour in the pretence of doing up the house after the death of the old man. I could not muster the strength needed to lift the lid alone, for my power is in my mind, not in my muscles. When fate decided to deal me a heavy blow, the very week before my plan to rob my old man's grave, there came a new addition to the crypt. On any other occasion, I would have been glad to hear such news, but in the circumstances it came as a great inconvenience to me. Every Sunday, a devious child, intent on pulling on my delicate nerves, ran a stick along my white picket fence. Rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat. It was such an infuriating noise, and on a Sunday. She was the core of all wickedness, a diminutive witch indeed. How often I have resisted the urge to hurl a stone her way. Yet once she's rounded the corner, the desire had lulled again to the depths of my stomach. One Sunday, the conniving child and her brother had ran out in the road and under the wheels of a milk cart. Her brother survived, but she did not. Alas, she was buried down in the crypt. This news enraged me. I had been patient up until now, but the necklace called to me. I am not an impatient soul, the opposite indeed. But its gold value was mine. I wanted to belong to me, and I could wait no longer. I did not fear the child. She was not such a threat. This was only a minor setback. Her body was weak. She would never have the strength to lift the stone lid of her coffin. My carefully planned actions should not stir her from her slumber. Dusk had fallen by the time that I ventured down into the crypt. With the crowbar grasped in my hand, my confidence was high. The crowbar could not lie and deceive and write disowning wills as my father had done. Nor could it irritate, grind on one's nerves as that conniving child had done so many Sundays past. It would be my brawn, although surely, if I had not been so clever by half, I would not have thought up such an ingenious plan. No genius could have done better. My feet pad down the stone-cold steps. Hearken, what is that? The click of my heels only. Perhaps that scratch? A mouse, surely somewhere deep in the crypt. Calmly I reassured myself. All that remained in the stone casket now was a body. His spirit would have now fled to the afterlife, to heaven or hell. We bid to hell. Now you must think me a cruel man to rob my poor father's grave, but cruel was he also. Oh, how he mocked and scorned me as a child, with what hatred he held in his heart, how he despised me, and I him. It is true, they perceive me weak, but see now how strong I must be to carry out such a daring plan. Come, my friend, you will now assist me in the opening of my cold father's cold grave. I have sharp hearing, as defined as a bird. I keep one ear alert for the return of the vicar. As a bird listens for the approach of a cat, so acutely I listen. But that drip from the damp roof of the crypt, splish, splash, down into the stone floor, I spun around. Ah, that fluttering of bats, as they roost high in the rafters, their feet scratch also, with intent, I'm sure, their contempt at my disturbing their silent abode. I approach the tomb. My good friend's metal arm slips between the narrow crack under the lid, and I heave. A grinding commences, and I heave again. So focused was I on my work, my mission for ownership, for power, for control of that necklace, I noticed not at all that fallen silence. Then, as I stop for breath, that scratching starts up again, but this time not from the roof. To my left and behind me I can hear a knocking, a tapping, and a scratching. The scratch becomes more pronounced, persistent and unnerving. Only then, to my dismay, do I realise the source of this frustrating noise. From the smallest casket, there against the wall, she scrapes still, on the inside of her coffin, as if it was a white picket, and the bells ringing. Oh, horror of all horrors, what loathing she must hold to mock me in her death also! My movements became frantic. Faster and faster I thrust the crowbar into the gap. I force it with all my might and the power of my mind. Then, just as the lid began to slide, the stench hit me, and I could contain it no longer. I recoiled from my father's tomb. I shuddered and bawled. Then, to my increased distress, the vicar, keeper of souls, appeared in the doorway. With a final grimace I shake, trembling, and fall to the ground. Oh, what a sight to see! The coffin lid half open, and myself writhing on the floor. The agony of it all. The insult to my very soul. What have I ever done to deserve this in life? To be robbed of what is rightfully mine by a man no longer alive, and to be mocked by a girl not yet cold in her grave. I am haunted, I tell you, haunted. In life, and in death surely also. As a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, I really enjoyed reading that story. Big thank you to the author for sending it in. Hopefully we'll get to read more of his work on the show. Tune in again next week for another episode of Danica Raven's Bite Size Horror. We love all the artwork you've been sending into the show. If you have stories, music or artwork of your own, please get in contact as we'd love to showcase it.